Hey folks, it's Jennifer McGuire. Thanks for stopping by. Today's video actually shows a fun technique, actually two ways of doing a fun technique, where you create die-cut windows with a word kind of suspended across the window. So I'm going to show you two ways of doing the technique. One is a little bit harder, and that's what I'm going to do first, and then the second is a little bit easier. It's just two ways to do it, and you can choose which you like best. And this actually will result in 4 cards because we're going to use the negative space to make a card too. So this is the first set of cards with the more difficult technique, but I promise you it's not too bad. And if we can do this, we can definitely do the second set of cards, which is a little bit easier, and that's what I used here. I also wanted to mention that these cards are part of a challenge over on Virginia Lou's blog. She's one of the sweetest people in the industry, and she does fun challenges. This time it's about die cutting, and she asked me to play along, and I'll have links over to her blog. So let's go ahead and start with the harder technique first. I prefer this way because I think the results are really nice and crisp, but it may or may not make a difference to you, so be sure to watch both techniques and decide which you like better. So if you look here, I have this circle window cut in the front of this panel, and I have a word kind of suspended across it, and it's all connected in one piece. First, I wanted to show you how I created that background. You could use pattern paper here or cardstock, whatever you want, but I decided to do some tone-on-tone coloring with a stencil. Now I wanted to show you how I did this first. All I'm doing is softly applying a light layer of Distress ink on the background of this white card. You could use any ink for this, but Distress ink blends super well. So you can see it's a super light area. I made sure to ink up the edges nice to give it a nice defined edge. I just want to put a soft layer down, and I'm using my mini ink blending tool, which gives a nice even blending. Now after I've covered this with that even color, I'm just going to temporarily adhere it to my table, and I'm going to put a stencil over it. And then I'm going to apply the exact same color ink over the stencil, but a little bit heavier, so I end up with a tone-on-tone look. I'm going to use a little bit of painter's tape to tape this memory box stencil down. It's very delicate very delicate stencil, but it gives really beautiful results. So now what I'm going to do is, instead of doing the swirling motion with the ink blending tool, which I normally do, I'm going to pounce over the stencil because this stencil is so delicate. I don't want to kind of mess it up as I'm swirling the ink on. So instead I'm just kind of pouncing the ink on, just dabbing it along, and it really does a great job blending on its own. After I've inked up a pretty heavy layer of ink over the stencil, I'm just going to go ahead and take it off, and you get this great tone-on-tone look. And this will kind of smooth out as it dries. It's just a great way to get a tone-on-tone look with the stencil. Very easy to do. Now I wanted to add something a little more interesting to this background, so I decided to go outside and give it a quick spritz with this glitter dust. And check it out. It's hard to see in the video, but there's a little bit of sparkle to the paper, and it just adds a little bit of interest. This is a great way to give something subtle but interesting to a card. Okay, so now it's time to do that window. See how the H and the O are connected on the sides of the circle? This is done with partial die cutting. Again, this is the harder of the two techniques, but I like how it's that continuous piece where it's all connected. Before we do the die cutting, we have to do a little bit of planning. So I have a circle die from My Favorite Things and a hello die from Mama Elephant, and I want to plan where these are going to go. So I'm going to first take my circle die and tape it in place in the background where I want my window to be. I then am going to make little pencil marks where these dies overlap, so where the H and the O overlap on the circle, and this will give me a guideline of where I want to do my partial die cutting. Again, this sounds intimidating, but as you watch you'll see it's really not that hard to do. So I'm just doing a pencil mark right onto the circle die. You could use a heart or a frame here, whatever you wanted to. Partial die cutting can be done with any die cut machine you may have. I'm going to use a Big Shot in this video. Now the key to partial die cutting is you're using the edge of your cutting plate right here that you see right here as your guide for your partial die cutting. I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to line up the first pencil marks on the bottom, so this one right here and the one on the bottom. I'm going to line up those pencil marks with the edge of that plate. So you can see it kind of lines up with the plate. This is so that everything that's between the plates from here over to the left of those pencil marks will get cut. So I'm just cutting the bottom of the circle right now, and you'll see why in a few moments. So I'm going to go ahead and run this through my machine. Everything hanging off the plate will not cut, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So I'm going to run this through the machine and bring it out, and you'll see that just the bottom of the circle below those pencil marks have cut through them. I had a little adhesive on the back of this. That's okay, I just pulled off the plates, and there you can see the bottom of the circle cut. So now we're going to go ahead and rotate this and cut above the pencil mark, so we do the top part of our circle. Again, I'm using the edge of my plate as a guide for my partial die cutting. Everything else will hang off the plate. So now I'm lining up the edge of the plate with the 2 pencil marks that you see here, this one up here and the one on the bottom. So now it's just going to cut everything to the left of these pencil marks, which will be the top of our circle. Everything hanging out of the plates will not get cut. And I've done many partial die cutting videos, and I will put links in the description below and also here in the annotations for you to check those videos out if you want to see others. Okay, so now when I take this off, we'll end up having the top half of the circle cut and the bottom half of the circle cut, but not between those pencil marks where we connect the word hello. So again, this is the more advanced or tricky of the two techniques. The second one's much easier. Okay, now we need to do the hello die cut. Now this is kind of interesting how to do this, and I think I came up with this, and I think I'll be using this technique for other techniques in the future, so stay tuned for that. I'm just going to tape down the hello where I want it to cut. Now what I need to do is cut only between the circle, so inside of the circle. Now that sounds kind of tricky, but it's really easy to do. I'm going to line up my plate with where they overlap. So you see how the plate is lined up with that O right there where the O overlaps the circle. And I'm just going to tape my paper down so the rest of that die that's hanging off the edge won't cut. What I'm going to do is actually only die cut this, put it through my machine only part of the way. So I'm just going to run this through my machine and stop halfway. So you'll see I'm going to run this. I don't want to cut it all the way across or the H will cut completely through. So watch, I'm just going to crank this a little bit so that I stop before that H. So you see I crank it through and I stop. Now I'm going to rewind and go the other way, and then I'm going to take this out and do the other side. And since the die is taped in place, I don't have to worry about it shifting, and that H has not cut through yet. Okay, so now we're going to lift this all off. You just be careful and it'll be fine. Any pieces that fall out you can save for another card. And I'm going to, again, line up the plate with where the H overlaps with the O. So I'm just going to line up right here. I'm going to move my tape over to the other side. The little H, the little beginning of that H die will not cut through because it's hanging off the plates. Now I'm going to put this through my machine and only go halfway. So the first time we cut basically the second half of the word hello, and this time we're cutting the first half of the word hello, and it doesn't cut off the ends of the word. So we end up with the word kind of floating in that circle window. This is just a fun way to create a card that kind of is all connected. All these pieces are connected. But again, I'll show you another way to do this in the end of this video too. So now there you can see I didn't perfectly match up. I'm just going to go with the craft knife and continue to cut along. But otherwise, the hello is connected to that whole background, and you have a window card with that word kind of suspended across it. And I just think that's super fun to do. I know there are some dies out there where they go ahead and die cut the window and the word across it, but this is a great way to use ones that you already have. It'd be fun to do a flower going across it, whatever you want. Okay, so now I wanted to do some embossing paste behind this window card. To save time, I'm going to do this very quickly, but I will put links here to some embossing paste videos if you've never done it before so you can see how it's really done. I'm going to go ahead and take my card. This is just a white folded card, and I'm going to tape it onto my work surface so that it doesn't shift while we're doing this. Now, I wanted the embossing paste that's in the window to line up with the stencil pattern that's on the front of the card. So it's all kind of continuous. You'll see what I mean in a few moments. What I'm going to do is put some tape on the top and the bottom of my stencil so it's ready to tape down once we get it centered. And then I'm going to take my window and line it up with the stencil. See how that pattern is lining up with the pattern on the background? So the pattern of the stencil lines up with the pattern of the background that we've done. I'm going to center this on my card, and then I'm going to remove the die cut piece that we have here. It's just a holding place. Remove that off of it, and I have my stencil perfectly placed in the on the card so that the pattern of the embossing paste that we're about to put down lines up with the pattern on the window. So I'm just taking some Wendy Vecchi white embossing paste. This is by far my favorite. A lot of people ask if modeling paste works. You can do it, but I don't find that the results are nearly as good as this great icing-like embossing paste. I just use a tool to kind of spread it around. I'm not taking care of what the sides of this look like because I only need that circle window area to show through. So I'm just making sure I have enough right here, kind of top center of my card. I'll scrape the extra off. I'll make sure to clean my stencil right away so this doesn't dry, and close the jar of paste so that it doesn't dry out. And I'll set this aside to dry. Now after it has dried, I'm going to go ahead and add some foam tape to the back of our die cut panel and add this on it so it looks like the word hello kind of floats across the little window that we've created, and you can see the embossing paste behind the window lines up with the inked stencil that we did on the front panel. So you can see how that all lines up, and you end up with a card that kind of blends together. And I'll come back and show you how I did the bling on this. But first, I wanted to show you how I used the remainder of those pieces on the other card. So let me show you the card on the left now. I just have a white note card where I am taping some painter's tape along the edge of each side of the card. And I'm doing about 1/4 of an inch in, so I'm masking off 1/4 of an inch around the edge of the card. This way, when I put my embossing paste over the stencil, the little 1/4 inch around the edge will be perfectly clear of it, so we have a nice masked area in the center. So I'm just going to again apply my embossing paste over this, and I like to try to put it on smooth, so I kind of go back and forth until I get a nice even coverage. Once I have this, I just go ahead and remove my stencil carefully, and then I will remove all the masking tape. And there you can see you've got the nice clean embossing paste in the center with the nice trim around the edge. So now I'm going to use the remainder of the pieces from the last card we did. After this dries, I'm going to go ahead and glue these leftover pieces onto the card. Again, I'm lining up that stencil pattern on the inked piece with the embossing paste stencil in the background. Just kind of ties it all together. And I'll go ahead and glue the bottom piece on, and then all the little bits and pieces from inside the H, the E, the L, and the O, I'll just glue in place with a little bit of multi-medium, whatever your favorite liquid glue may be. To finish this card off, I just put a single glitter die cut heart on there. Now for the other card I did some bling, and at the end of this video, again, I'll show you how to do that bling. So that wraps up the first way of doing these die-cut windows with a word suspended across it. So that's like the more advanced way of doing it. It gets a nice connected look, but this is the easier way to do it. And if you look closely, you'll see that the words don't actually connect across the die-cut window, but it looks like it does, and nobody would ever notice. So this is the easy way of doing it. I'm just going to briefly show you the background. For these cards, I did the same thing. I did a light layer of distress ink on white cardstock. I put down a stencil and applied a heavier layer of the same color. So this is dot stencil from Simon Says Stamp. And then I have a nice tone-on-tone background. You could use pattern paper here if you wanted to. A great way to use up pattern paper. So now again, I'm planning how I'm going to do this. I have a heart from My Favorite Things and a word die from Simon Says Stamp. But this time, you don't have to do any partial die cutting. You just start with your word and go ahead and cut it from your piece here. Just run it through your die cut machine. Be sure to save all the little nooks and crannies from the word, so if you want to do the bonus card with the extra pieces, you can. And now that I have my word cut out, I need to put my heart around it. But it's hard to see where to place the die because this isn't an open die. So what I did was die cut the heart from some scrap paper, and I'm lining it up here. This is my guide. I'm just lining it up exactly where I want it to cut. I'm lining up with the dots in the background. And then I will take my die and put it into my guide. So I'm just going to place it right into my guide. It kind of pops in place. Then I will hold the die in place, remove the guide, and just put that in the trash. And now tape this heart, and now I have the heart exactly placed where I want, and you can see that the thanks sticks out on the left and on the right of this heart, just a tad. I probably should have had it stick out more, but this works fine. So after I've cut it out, I'm going to save these pieces for the second card, but first I want to suspend this word across it. So this is where we're cheating and making this so much easier than the first technique. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and put some Scotch tape to tape the little end of the S over on this side of the heart and the little end of the T over on the other side of the heart. So this suspends it. So even though it cut through, it looks like it's all still connected. So you know, this is the easy way of doing this technique. I do like that the first technique actually has it completely connected, but it really is up to you. I wanted to be able to show you both. Okay, so now I just put some foam tape on the back of this, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick it on the card. I decided to skip the embossing paste on this one to make it faster, and there you have the thanks die cut word kind of suspended across the die cut window. Just for some added fun on these dots, I decided to add some Wink of Stella to the dots only, just to add a little bit of shimmer. It's subtle in the video, but in real life, it really makes a big difference in catching the eye. Okay, so now I have bling on this card. Again, I'm going to cover the bling at the end of this video, so just stick with me for a few more minutes. I wanted to show you what I did with the leftover pieces from this technique. I started by adding the top of the heart to some white cardstock, and now I'm adding the bottom of the heart to it also. Now you'll notice there are some teeny tiny little nooks and crannies inside of this word, inside of each of these little letters. I'm just taking my favorite multi-medium liquid adhesive and squirting on my work surface, smeared around, and I'm using the Quick Sticks tool, which has a little sticky end, to pick up these little tiny pieces and then dip them in the adhesive and then move them over to my card. So whatever technique works best for you to pick up those little guys and put them in place. It takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it because you have these pieces. You might as well use them. Now for this card, I also added glossy accents to those little dots just to add a little bit of something fun because I kept the card pretty simple. And there you have the second set of cards. So it's the same technique, but a much easier way of doing it. And you end up with 2 cards for the price of 1. So that's always a fun thing to do. Now, as I promised, I wanted to show you how I did the bling on these cards. So I'm going to start with the thanks card first. I have some sequins. These are just kind of some clear iridescent sequins. I'm putting some multi-medium, which is my favorite adhesive to use with sequins because it holds tight. I'm going to pick up the sequin with my tweezers, dip it into the adhesive, and then place it on the card. I decided to do 3 sequins on this card. I like to put 2 of them close together and then one off by itself and kind of create a little visual triangle. Now after I have all these in place, I wanted to add little gems in the center, which you've seen me do in other videos. I decided to do something different this time. I have a paper pen, which is like a liquid silver and kind of creates what looks like enamel dots. I'm going to put a little dot in the center of each of these sequins. I like to cover up that hole. And then I'm going to scatter a few of these little dots around the thanks word. So this is a great way to kind of make your own quick enamel dots if you don't happen to have any on hand. And also you can make them tinier using this product. So it ends up drying nice and shiny. And I kind of got carried away and put too many dots down here. I would have stuck with just a few, but I kept going. I never know when to stop. So there you have that card. You can see what it looks like dry there with the little silver dots. And you have the pair with the easier technique. Now let's go back to the first card that we did and add the bling to that one. You can see I did the same thing. I just did little dots of adhesive with some sequins and then little dots of this silver paper pen scattered along the card there on the right. Okay, so there you have it. A long video that's kind of rambly. I apologize. Is rambly a word? I apologize for that. Anyways, I just wanted to squeeze a lot in here and show you 2 different ways to do this technique of die cut windows with the word stretched across it. As always, my products are linked below my YouTube description to multiple sources, or you can head over to my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com for much more information. Thanks so much for stopping by and watching this kind of long video, and I hope to see you again soon.